Hello, everyone. This is Sinema77, horror and cult film lover. I'm back with another movie review. And today I want to talk about the true crime film Karla, starring Laura Prepon and Mischa Collins. Laura Prepon, everybody knows her as Donna from that '70s show. Mischa Collins, everybody knows him as the angel on Supernatural. And this here, this movie's kind of special because when I first took the job on Body Bags, this actually ended up being the very first movie that I reviewed on the show. Because when I did my first episode, the theme they did a theme week, and by that time the theme was serial killer week, and so you could do like a movie about serial killers, whether they were true life crime stories or they were um, fictional, something like Silence of the Lambs or something like that. And, I figure like everybody would be doing something like Charles Manson or Ted Bundy or something like that. And I wanted to try to do a little something different. And I've always been darkly fascinated with the story of Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo. And this here is what they really looked like back on the day of their wedding. Now, Paul and Carla are both known as the Ken and Barbie killers because they have this basically pure, perfect look. She looks like the perfect girl. He looks like the perfect guy. But yeah, they ended up as turns out that they were killers. And one thing that I did when I did the video for the Body Bags channel, and I'd like to go ahead and do it here too, is there are at least three known murder victims that belong to Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka. Unfortunately, there is Carla's 15-year-old sister Tammy. There was Leslie McHaffney and Kristen French. Now, I just wanted to take a second to say a sincere and heartfelt rest in peace to those victims. They didn't deserve what happened to them. Um, Hopefully, they get the justice that they deserve. But yeah, they were innocent girls. They didn't do anything wrong. They had pretty much had the world in front of them. There was no reason for them to have to be, abducted and murdered the way that they were. But I do want to just, and it goes for other ones too. It's like when I talk about the Tate LaBianca murders, for example. It's like, my thoughts extend to them as well. It's like those people, they didn't deserve to die like that. So I mean, I do issue a sincere, heartfelt rest in peace to the victims. Now, the way the story starts, the movie starts, basically, you find out from the movie that it's pretty much all being taken from Carla's point of view. And it starts with, when she first met Paul Bernardo, and they have an instant attraction to each other, an instant chemistry. And so they get together and they start getting into their relationship. And um, but there ends up being a problem. Eventually, it doesn't take long for Carla to find out that Paul's got a dark side to him and that Paul is, in fact, known as the Scarborough rapist. He hasn't been convicted for the crime yet. They did DNA tests, which unfortunately I think it took decades, or at least a decade, before they found out that he was the Scarborough rapist, and then they were finally closing in on him. But for the longest time, it's like, but she knew that he was. She knew that he was going out and attacking and raping women in parks and sidewalks and things like that. But she thought that maybe he would settle down and and that they could just go and live there happily ever after. Well, one thing becomes a problem. We find out that Paul is actually he's furious with Tammy, or he's not furious with Tammy. He's furious with Carla because Carla was not a virgin when they met, and Paul really wants to deflower a virgin. So rather than be appalled or upset or anything, what ends up happening is that Carla decides she's going to go ahead because of her love for Paul. She decides she's going to go ahead and give him for Christmas, give him his wish that to go ahead and basically take the virginity of her sister, Tammy, who was only 15 years old at the time. And so he's happy about that because we find out as soon as he meets Carla, as soon as he meets Tammy, he's got his eyes set on her, and he really wants to get to her, and so I mean, obviously the guy's a nasty perv and stuff. So anyway, so it's coming up on Christmas, and so she ends up stealing. I think it's something like animal tranquilizers. She's working, either as a veterinary or a veterinary assistant. So she steals these tranquilizers, and they're having a Christmas party, and really it's like the only ones at this Christmas party are Karla and Paul and Tammy. And so they're, oh come on, Tammy, you can have a little booze and stuff. It's okay. So they start giving her drinks, and Karla starts lacing the drinks with the tranquilizer, and she starts, and it seems like it's not working, and so and then basically she finally does, pretty much pass out, and then they decide that it's time. And so he gets out his video camera, he's videotaping it, and they take like a rag with like something like chloroform, and they put it over her face, and to keep her, as long as she's breathing, she'll stay passed out. And so they end up, he starts raping her, and he's telling Karla to get in this version of the film. Like I said, it's basically, this version of the film is Karla's version of the whole story, but I'll get to that in just a minute. So he's telling her to like kiss Tammy's nipples and to do this to her, do that to her. Karla refuses, so he strikes her, and she starts doing what he wants her to do, and then Tammy starts vomiting up, choking on her vomit and stuff. And so they realize, like, yeah, she's had a bad reaction to this stuff, and so they kind of try to get everything cleaned up, and they get her to, they call an ambulance to take her away, and then she goes to the hospital. Unfortunately, Tammy doesn't make it. So they're upset about that, and but Karla doesn't seem like she's too upset that she's lost her sister, and instead she's kind of more like, oh, we need to focus on our happily ever after, and I gave you this, and I gave you, so I couldn't give you my virginity, but I gave you my sister's virginity, and he's still not satisfied. And then at one point he decides. See, the thing is, they kind of change it up, So he ends up. I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry, I got confused. But he ends up. He goes away, and then he comes back, and when he comes back from a trip, and that they're getting ready to get married and stuff, so he decides he wants to go ahead and go out and get himself a girl. And so he comes across Leslie Mahaffey, and he ends up in the movie. He's about to break into a house, and she runs into him, and you know, so I think she asks him for a cigarette. But anyway, so he ends up abducting her and takes her to his house, and then he ends up, you know, basically assaulting her over and over again and raping her over and over again. And the point is, she's supposed to keep her eyes closed. She's not supposed to look at him, even though she's already seen him. And at one point, Karla, she's just basically kind of hanging back while this is all going on. She's, reading the book American Psycho. If you follow the true story, it's supposedly it's supposed to be said that Paul Bernardo's favorite book of all time was American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis, and so he wants to, so she decides, no, I don't want to sit here and be alone by myself anymore, and so he's telling her, well, you don't have to be alone. You could come in and join us. And so, yeah, so she goes up and they're starting to get into this. And so he's telling Karla, like, to touch the girl a certain way, kiss her a certain way, do this, do that. And he keeps telling the girl, keep your eyes shut, keep your eyes shut. And, she's crying and she's, begging and pleading for her life. And at one point she does open her eyes. And he's all like, fuck, she wasn't supposed to open her eyes and all this stuff. And so Karla's like, they're getting her a glass of water, and she's like, please, and all this stuff. And ultimately, Paul does end up strangling her to death. And one of the things I have to admit about this movie is that it's actually kind of really nice that it doesn't dwell on showing the violence of the crimes too much. I mean, it gives you enough of an idea of what's happening without having to be over explicit about it. It doesn't need to be overly graphic, needlessly graphic. I mean, you get the idea. So they strangle the poor girl to death, and then they decide that they need to hide the body. So Paul ends up deciding that he's going to go ahead and cut her up, and he's going to submerge her body parts, like he submerges her head, her arms, her torso, and everything into the cement blocks. And there's 8 of them, so they take them to the river and they toss them in the river, thinking that they'll sink. And then, oddly enough, on the day of their wedding, the day of Paul and Karla's wedding, the day the cinder blocks or the blocks with the body parts were found on that day of their wedding, but they didn't have enough evidence or anything to convict Paul or Karla of it. And then time goes on, they get married, and he's still, he's still got to have a girl, and he's still not satisfied, and so they decide they're going to try to get another girl, and this is when they abduct Kristen French from her basically her Catholic school. I think it's St. Catherine's, if I remember correctly. And so what they do is Paul and Karla, they're driving up in a car, and they're going to trick this girl. And so they pull up. She's walking down the sidewalk, and so Karla asks her, could you please, yeah, I have a map here and I'm lost. Could you please give me directions to someplace? And so she's like, yeah. And so Karla gets out of the car, and the girl's showing her, okay, you're going to drive here, you're going to turn here, this and that. And meanwhile, Paul gets out of the car. He comes around and he pulls a knife on the girl, and they get her into the car. And, they take her, back to their place where Paul, again, he starts, sexually abusing her and raping her and molesting her and everything over and over again. And, same thing, kind of like Karla's like, kind of left to herself, and he's telling her, leave us. I want time alone with her and stuff like that. So he does eventually bring her into the room, and it's the 3 of them. And so he's telling her to, he's telling the girl Kristen French to degrade herself and say, you're my little slut, you're my little whore, say I'm the king, and all this other kind of stuff. And so they, the news comes on, and it's Kristen's parents, and they're, pleading for the return of their daughter. They're pleading for her to be safe. And this is the one part I really liked in the movie, was that he's trying to get Kristen to degrade herself, and she ends up standing up to him. She ends up, just, she's telling him like, no, you sit here, you try to tear me down, but my parents love me, my family loves me, my boyfriend loves me, all this, and you can't take that away from me. And she's defiant to him up to the end, which I like. I like the fact that she basically told him off, that she wasn't going to go out that way. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of tearing her down. She was gonna put him in his place before she died. And so they end up they kill her, and then but then it's like the relationship between Karla and Paul becomes more strained. He's becoming more physically abusive, and he's beating on Karla. She tries to get away. He comes and cries and begs and pleads with her to take him back, and so she does, and he ends up beating her some more. And then then it turns out that the DNA matched him for the Scarborough rapist. They're closing in on him, and Karla finally breaks away from him. She goes to the police, and she tells them, she will testify against Paul that he is the Scarborough rapist. She'll testify against him for the murders in exchange for a reduced sentence, which they end up doing. And and pretty much that's about where the movie ends. Is like kind of like letting that she did testify against him, and that their house was torn down, and because of the murders that occurred there and stuff. But the thing is in the real life story is that in this version in the movie, basically it's meant that Karla was a victim, that she was an unwilling victim by Paul. But the thing that ended up happening, though, was when they made that deal with her, they really didn't have any evidence to convict the both of them. So kind of like all they had was her testimony to convict. But the thing was, they had already made the deal with her. Then the videotapes that they had made of all the, Paul Bernardo videotaping all the murders and everything else. And what ended up happening was they found out that she was very much a willing participant. She was not the she was not the victim that she made herself out to be. Some people said like a lot of that was even like a lot of it was stuff she instigated. She started a lot of it too, and she was very much a willing participant and things like that. And but the problem was they had already made the deal with her. They couldn't back out, and Canadian papers at the time even called it the deal with the devil. And but she did end up ultimately testifying again. She went to court. She got her reduced sentence. Then she ended up testifying against Paul. He got life in prison. Um, but yeah, it was one of the more disturbing stories that I've ever heard as far as true crime goes. Because yeah, I mean these, it's weird because you sit there and you hear these stories, and it's like it's always the people that seem like they have the most going for them. They have the most, they're most on the good track, and they could do well in life. But it always ends up being this thing of they end up destroying it. They could have a great thing. They could have a great future for themselves, but they end up ruining it for themselves. I don't understand that, but they do. But because they're sick and twisted people. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty much about the movie. But I do like the movie. I think that Laura Prepon, she did a good job. I mean, this was definitely her getting out of her comfort zone because mostly she's known for comedy, but she handled a dramatic role pretty well. I think she did a good job. Mischa Collins, I think he did a good job too. I mean, I admit I haven't watched all of Supernatural, but I thought he did have that combination of kind of charming and nice mixed with vicious and cruel. I thought he did that very well. I think the movie's pretty much well done. It's good if you like a good true crime movie. And I remember I did that for like I said, I did that the first episode when I was on Body Bags, and yeah, so I would highly recommend it if you can find it. The movie Karla on DVD, and I definitely say yeah, go for it. It's a good true crime story. It's interesting. You got good acting. Yeah, there's really no weak links in this movie. Everybody does a good job. I will say the movie does feel kind of. It definitely has like a. At first, I thought it was a TV movie because it definitely has like a made-for-TV feel to it. And at first, that's what I thought it was, but realized like no, with the language and stuff in it, no, it's like this is not a TV movie. I don't think. But anyway, though, yeah, I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up. But yeah, I still find that to me it's like yeah, the Ken and Barbie killers, Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka. I always found that one of the more kind of disturbing stories, and that was the thing. As far as I know, he's still in jail. He's never getting out. But yeah, she got out of jail and she went on with her life. And as far as I know, I think he even reconciled with her family. He's like, why? Your man murdered your baby sister, and you even helped. We found out that you actually went in on it and you helped. So I don't know. But that's between them. I can't jump into that. But anyway, so that's gonna pretty much wrap it up. I say, yeah, go ahead and watch the movie, and hopefully I got all my facts straight. But anyway, that's gonna do it. So if anybody took the time to watch this video, I thank you for doing it, and I appreciate you for doing it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. I do weekly reviews. I do shelf by shelf of my movie library. I do haul videos, things like that. Trying to do theme weeks, things like that. So hopefully I can make some good entertainment that everybody will enjoy. So until then, this is Sinema77, horror and cult film lover, and I wish you all a good evening and take care. Have a good night, and I'll see you later.